This episode contains discussions of sexual assault. If that is the topic you do not want to listen to, feel free to skip to any of our other episodes. Thank you.
And apologies for the background noise.
Hello, this is Taha.
This is Anaina,
This is Muhi Masala.
and we're here to yap at you about films we've watched recently.
And today we're doing After the Hunt by Luca Guadagnino.
Having this conversation with you anymore.
Not everything is supposed to make you comfortable, Maggie. Not everything is supposed to be a lukewarm bath for you to sink into until you fall asleep and drown.
And there are no rewards in death for suffering as much as
I'm so excited about this film.
Oh, I really wish you had seen this film before we were able to start, because I think this is such a film that you would enjoy as someone who's still in academia, right? Basically, what this film is about is these collection of academics who are in the philosophy department. So not just academics, but academics, like people who discuss thinking for a living, who think about thinking for a living.
Exactly, the meta thinkers.
And again, as someone who's also done humanities, talking to another person who did a humanities degree in university and continuing to do so, we understand that sometimes you talk about things, you're like, if I talk to this to with a normal person off the street, they will think that I am just saying jargon. Philosophy in that way feels like the final boss for that,
In the humanities, like, we are the normal people in comparison to the philosophy ones.
Yeah. But look, don't get me wrong. I enjoy stuff like that academically. It's fun to think about those things, right? And I think if you are that type of person, this film has a substantial amount to offer. And I'll come to how well it does that at the end, right? But basically what it's about is this group of academics, primarily played by Julia Roberts, Ayo Edebiri, Andrew Garfield, and Michael Stolberg. And basically the plot kicks off when Ayo Edebiri's character, Maggie, gets sexually assaulted by Andrew Garfield's character, Hank, right? And that kind of is the through line, or like the narrative push that kicks off and makes you talk about other things. Because at the end of the day, this film is much more about these people and how they navigate this scenario and how they exist within it and the academic structure in which they play around and all of that. But the whole assault serves as a means to examine all of that. It's like a good way to understand all of that, right? So again, this is Luca Guadagnino's next film after Challengers, right? A film that I feel permeated the mainstream. I think partly because of Zendaya.
I just saw like a TikTok edit about it. It's very much still in the mainstream.
Yeah, partly was the soundtrack for Challengers.
I saw it After the Hunt as the same composers, as the same people who did the music as Challengers. I'm really interested about how the music played. And music was like a big part of Challengers. I'm interested in the role it plays here.
I think this film also does have a good soundtrack. I don't get me wrong. I think the soundtrack is permeating throughout the film. But I think because of the nature of Challengers, which is a sports film and just much more high octane, I don't think as many people are going to vibe with the soundtrack for After the Hunt as did Challengers. I don't think it's a bad soundtrack. I think it does its job well, right? It's just not as energetic at times. It just is a different mood, very much so.
It's kind of like the supporting role.
Yeah, exactly. The score in After the Hunt never really comes to the front as the score in Challengers did, right?
Sure.
Although there is a lot of diegetic music in After the Hunt that is continuously there, and a lot of non-diegetic like musical cues that I'll come to as well. So I think, like I explained what the plot was, right? And I think another comparison from Challengers is that as this film starts and you are in the house of like Julia Roberts' character, Alma, right? And there's this massive house party. It feels like a match regardless. It feels like an intellectual match where people are throwing little jabs at each other. People are reacting to each other's like little things in like such, in picking apart things, the looks that people are giving each other, the glances. There's so many things that these people are saying without a single word.
So it feels like an intellectual tennis match.
It feels very like an intellectual tennis match. Exactly. And I think, again, like I said, with the looks and everything, you're so much like feel like, okay, you're in their world and this is how they operate. And again, the acting is superb in this. The acting is really what helps bring this so much of this to life. Like, again, Julia Roberts is Julia Roberts. Like, need I say more, right?
She is the ultimate acting queen.
Ayo Edebiri, who is like one of the rising stars at the moment, like genuinely with The Bear, with
Bottoms.
Bottoms, Inside Out, Theater Camp, which I absolutely loved her in. So many films which she's done so well in. Then you have Michael Storberg, who's also so fun in this role. And lastly, my beloved Andrew Garfield, who I think is so well utilized in this. Andrew Garfield is your main villain. And the thing with Andrew Garfield is, oh my God, is he charming. And he is perfect for this role because till the last like 15 minutes, there is a part of you that despite like, again, me being a very progressive minded person, I'm like, but what if Ayo Edebiri is like lying though? What if he is right?
Which I guess is kind of the point, right? The point of casting Andrew Garfield in such a charming role is to kind of get everyone who thinks they're progressive and feminist to take a second and be like, yeah, but what are my limits?
Exactly. You know, and again, shout out to Jessica Ronan and Abby Galvin who casted this, right? Because he is genuinely that charming. It's, I think, the same thing that was done in Promising Young Women to great effect. Again, he does rip that out apart as well by himself as well, because that's just his character and that's how well he plays it. But yeah, I think it's really well done in that part, right? Also, now I want to talk about what this film, like, at its crux is about. Like I mentioned, how it's using the assault thing to investigate. I think one thing that's very front and center of what it's investigating is the use of language in a lot of leftist academic spaces, right? It to some part is talking about like how we kind of just throw words around. And when I say that, I don't mean necessarily in the sense of like people using words for what they don't mean. I mean in a smart way where, like, so example, Maggie directly saying to Alma, which is like, you're saying these words as if I'm another entity and not sitting right in front of you here right now. Like, you're talking about this from such a cold, distant perspective.
It's like academic intelligence whose dick is bigger competition.
It feels like you intellectualize things so much, you talk about them in such grand terms so much that you forget the person that it happened to is in front of you. Like, stop it.
Or rather that the person in front of you is a person.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also like this idea of like how academics will use language in certain ways. Well, doesn't mean that represents their beliefs, right? So how Oma does break down a student who's like, the current status quo is like, now I feel equally qualified women is probably going to get a job over an equally qualified man because of like the status quo, and how she breaks that down, which is like, do you really think I worked so hard? Like, I worked out through this thing that you've said is misogynistic and I deserve it less just because I'm a woman now? And in the same way. And then again, at the later half of the film, how she just keeps messing up someone's pronouns, right? And then makes fun of those pronouns and also goes like, don't you have a worthless protest you need to attend? Stuff like that. It's very shallow. It, I think, highlights how this use of this language and this like dialogue is sometimes just so shallow. Because when you're using this language, you're meant to obfuscate or like hide the fact that you don't really care that much. You're not doing much. You're just saying stuff. Right. And I found that very interesting.
As someone still in the academic realm, relatable experiences. No shade thrown to anyone in particular.
Yeah. And again, I think in that way, it's also about philosophy in a lot of ways of how we discuss that, things like that as well. I found it really happy when she started talking about Foucault and the Panopticon. And I was like, I know what that means. I know it. I was like, finally, I'm not made to feel dumb. I could be in Yale. This film takes part in Yale, by the way.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's a game of like, aha, this academic high intelligence term, I do know
it. Thank you. I'm smart.
I see that.
Yeah,
I see
and
that.
again, in that same way, when it's talking about philosophy, it also like when I say about language, I found that very well done as well, which Oma breaks down another student. Like, she is doing it badly, right? But I think I understood her point. Or like I agreed with her certain point where sometimes the other is not always meant to be a marginalized community or like someone who's oppressed. Sometimes the other is just the other. And like her talking about like, I need you to stop just viewing this philosophy from your particular worldview and like stop acting like everything has to fit within. It's like you are not actively critically thinking. You're just, you have a worldview and you're applying that to every single philosophy. That's all you're doing. And that's not how this should be done.
It's interesting to me that that applies in Alma's kind of worldview to the academic she's teaching, but not to like her practical real life experiences with people.
In some ways, yeah, exactly. And I think this is where it gets to the idea of like, main thing this is about though is these people. And I think that does muddle up some of the narratives as well, because these people are messy, right? And that includes every single member of this cast, right? With Alma, I think as the film progresses, you realize that again, how she's not on anyone's side. She just wants to get what's best for her. In the end of the day, she's just selfish. That's all that really is there to her, right? She's will say things or go through things to make sure she progresses. I think that's what at the end of the thing this film comes about, which is just there's a conversation, spoilers, which between Ayo Edebiri's character and Jessica Roberts at the very end, where she goes like, "Are you happy? Did this all fill this void for you?" And she just goes like, "Yeah, that is what made her happy." And Ayo Edebiri is like, "Well, then I'm happy for you," because for her, she doesn't care anymore. Like this is not worth it to me. And I think that is what it is. It's about a lot of these frustrated feelings. It's about these characters at the end of the day and how they view life. But I think it has a lot of interesting things to say in the middle of talking about academia, talking about language, talking about like people's conversations about these progressive issues sometimes and how shallow it can be in these vestiges.
Sure.
Now, my only thing gripe out of this is, Percy, sometimes you are unsure of where this film is going. Sometimes it just kind of is muddled a bit, or like it doesn't consistently have this. Because as I mentioned, it's kind of about these characters, and sometimes these characters feels like they're just stopped or like doing something else. Doesn't sometimes feel cohesive enough to me, right?
Sure.
And I think that
sure.
carries through with like how it's talking about these things as well. Because while it makes points, it doesn't say anything cohesive enough. Like it feels like an essay which is saying this happened and this book talks about this. But what are you saying? Why are you bringing all of this up? And what's the main thing you want me to at least try and take out of?
I see, I understand. I read a review that was like along similar lines. It was worded like way worse than you just worded. But yeah, I think I see what you mean, which is like you can have kind of, you don't need to have the answers to everything. But you do need to have like at least a thesis statement. Let's put it this way.
Yeah. I don't know what this film's real thesis statement is. I can understand the thesis statement has about the characters, but the topics it's examining, it feels like it gives me examples and counterexamples, but never why it thought this was important or like what is the conclusion at all that it feels like.
Sure.
So yeah, those were our
Yeah.
thoughts. Thank you for tuning in. This podcast is produced solely by us with musical assets from Pixabay. If you enjoyed this, please do share it. See you again next time.